Hi, friends. This is Pastor Dave Swinton of Boone First United Methodist Church, and this is our Thursday evening meditation. I wanted to speak with you this evening about two activities or traditions within our faith that are so important through times like this. Any times when, especially when we feel like we're waiting, we're at loose ends to know just what to do with ourselves. It's lament and thanksgiving. Now, often, when I tell a friend about my troubles, I'm not looking for them to give me answers or to correct me in some way. Sometimes I just want someone who can commiserate with me. They don't have to have just exactly the same problems that I have, but I do want to know that someone hears, that they understand, certainly that they care. A good friend of mine, Phil Snyder, wrote something recently that I think applies here. He began with the common phrase, now, I'm not sure who needs to hear this right now, but I just wanted to let you know that going through this pandemic is hard enough, all on its own. It's exhausting, all on its own. If if you aren't keeping up with all the things, that's okay. Give yourself some grace. We weren't built for this. We can't do all the things. If you feel overwhelmed, that's okay. If you need to cry, it's okay to cry. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you're human. And being human is traumatic. To be human in traumatic times is as hard as it gets. What Phil is talking about here is a human need to lament, to recognize our humanness, our limitations, our sorrows, our frustrations, sometimes even our anger. English theologian Bishop N.T. Wright wrote about lament just recently in Time magazine. He wrote, perhaps what we need more than anything else is to recover the biblical tradition of lament. Lament is what happens when people ask why and don't get an answer. It's where we get to when we move beyond our self-centered worry about our sins and failings and look more broadly at the suffering of the world. It's bad enough facing a pandemic in New York City or London. But what about a crowded refugee camp on a Greek island? What about Gaza or South Sudan? This continues to be Reverend Wright. The point of lament, woven thus into the fabric of the biblical tradition, is not just that it's an outlet for our frustration, sorrow, loneliness, and sheer inability to understand what is happening and why. The mystery of the biblical story is that God also laments. Some Christians like to think of God as above all of that, knowing everything, in charge of everything, calm and unaffected by the troubles of his world. That's not the picture that we get in the Bible. God was grieved to his heart, Genesis declares, over the violent wickedness of his human creatures. He was devastated when his own bride, the people of Israel, turned away from him. And when God came back to his people in person, the story of Jesus is meaningless unless that's what it's about. He wept at the tomb of his friend. It is no part of the Christian vocation, he writes, than to be able to explain what's happening and why. In fact, it is part of the Christian vocation not to be able to explain and to lament instead. As the Spirit laments with us, so we become, even in our own self-isolation, small shrines where the presence and the healing love of God can dwell. And out of that, there can even emerge new possibilities, new acts of kindness, new scientific understanding, and new hope. Again, that's from Bishop Bishop N.T. Wright, who teaches at Oxford. Now, here at our church, we had a Bible study back in Advent. And Advent is that season of preparation before Christmas, just like our current season, Lent, is a season of preparation for Easter. And one of the themes of Advent was also a theme of our study, waiting. Waiting when you don't know how much longer it will be. Waiting when you don't know exactly what the outcome will be. Waiting when you've done most of what you can do and know that the rest is out of your control. Our study group talked seriously about this dynamic. It's one thing to be faithful when the end is in sight, or when you expect your efforts or your suffering to bring a reward at some point down the line, but how do we make it through? We discovered that we need to take a break pretty regularly from our gloom and doom, from our passive waiting, even from our busy diversions. We need a moment to rest and a time to count our blessings, an opportunity to express gratitude for the people who have helped us, whether they knew they helped us or not. To write a note of thanksgiving, to give a call, to take photographs and notice the beauty of creation, to remember how God has brought us through in the past, to recount God's promises for us in our lives, to be a sign of promise for others. Isn't this what worship is? No, it's not simply it's not an exercise in turning frowns upside down or in denying our pain or helplessness. We cry out what we know to be true. We give thanks. We ask for what it is that we need. And we celebrate whenever we see evidence of love in our midst. I want to close with a reading from Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry unto thee, O Lord. Lord, hear my cry. Let thine ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If thou, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with thee, that thou may be feared. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits. And in his word do I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who wait for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord. For with the Lord is great mercy, with him is plenteous redemption. And he will redeem Israel from all of her sins. Amen.